Good evening and welcome to our Tuesday, February 20th, Legal Contracts and Board Policy Committee meeting. We have a full agenda today with discussion and 2 presentations. So, in the spirit of the agenda, I think we are also acknowledging the board members and committee members as a recommendation from the Finance Committee meeting, so we can carry that over into these meetings. And we will start with our previous meeting summary. Any comments beyond that?
Madam Chair, I'm not seeing the summary, but I would assume that the minutes look similar to the Finance Committee meeting minutes. So I would just ask that we note who the chair and vice chair of the committees are as we move forward. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And then in our packets here, the first one is our agenda for today. The agenda follows our new agenda format as discussed in the last meeting. So today's the first day we're fully trying it out. And then the second packet is the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Anybody wants to review anything else from there? That's the agenda. All right, and seeing no objections at this point, thankful for the agenda. And now we can move on to section 2, our discussion topics. Usually we would take these discussion topics one at a time. However, our last meeting, we saw that there was kind of a relationship between the two. So the first policy up for discussion, 169.1, public participation at board meetings. This is a policy that has been part of discussion in this committee meeting since I think maybe October now in various ways. But as it was brought up in our board retreat, we talked about the public participation at committee meetings. And so we also have policy 155 committees included in here also. And if you'd like to, thank you.
Sure, thank you. So we've discussed public participation at length. I think that the action items that we've discussed and have come to consensus on is the fact that this committee wishes to see special meetings and committee meetings added to the public participation policy. And then if you look toward the end of the committee meetings, there's one small error in that highlighted portion that Ms. Sykes pointed out, actually, that board should be committee in this language. It states the board, but should be committee. The committee, at its discretion, strives to respond in a timely manner to viewpoints presented during the hearing of the public, and that is to ensure that there is a dialogue when possible for members of the public that participate and the board to communicate back and forth.
And as everyone continues to review the 2 policies, the first stapled version, what brought this up a couple of months ago was actually the Neola revisions. Just as a background reminder, there were some Neola recommended updates, but our policy was already vastly different from what Neola had, and so trying to find a way to make this right for Akron.
At this point, the question is whether this committee feels comfortable with moving both of these policies forward, adding the language of committee and special meetings into the first public participation policy, and also the committee policy 0155 with the addition and with the revision of committee instead of the word board.
And reviewing the notes also, and the conversation from our board retreat, some of the questions that were brought up when it comes to the public participation at the board meetings is, would we have board and committee meetings, the way people would sign up to participate, or that at its discretion, having that as a procedure rather than a policy, if that would be sufficient to the board to move forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarity, what do you, when you said at its discretion, I'm sorry, I was trying to read the policy. What is the discretionary instead of the policy? You said to make what at the discretionary? The level in which they participate at, like committee meetings? What is the part that you said to make discretionary instead of policy?
Yes, so moving the minutes aside, then the next three documents, the stapled, and then public participation, and then the committees.
Yeah, so like the 0169.1.
Right.
That one, right?
And so there's actually two for 0169.1, which is kind of confusing. But then the 155 committees, at the very bottom of committees, there's the highlighted sentence. So really, this is the only change currently being discussed. We can discuss other things, but the only change currently being discussed to this policy would be just this one highlighted sentence. The committee, at its discretion, strives to respond in a timely manner to viewpoints presented during the hearing of the public.
Oh, where it says the board, you said it would just say the committee changed. Is that what you mean?
That's correct.
The only thing is and I'm fine with the will of, the majority, is that because it can show inconsistencies when it says at the discretion. So if one person engages, because we've had this happen in a meeting, if you come and you speak and then I address you or I stop you, and then community member B comes up and that doesn't happen, it appears that it's an inconsistency on the dyadic of the conversation, right? So I think if we're going to do something, it should be consistent, whatever that's going to be. Because when it's discretionary, it makes it subjective instead of objectively done. If it's going to be a policy, how we engage the public and how the public can engage in a meeting, I think it should be a policy, and we should follow that policy consistently, so it doesn't appear that cherry picking happens depending on what a person is saying or who speaks. That's just my opinion with the discretionary, unless I'm misunderstanding something.
Madam Chair, I would say that the difference is that the committee is different than an individual member. So if the committee decides that as a whole we want something to happen, then we will vote on it, and we will decide as a committee if we wanted to do it. But as an individual, you're absolutely right. And so as an individual, then the chair would make a determination whether or not that person wants you, whether or not the chair would want you as an individual. But this is speaking to the committee. So the committee would have to vote to say if we want to suspend the rules. So if we want to suspend the rules and allow something to happen, then that's what the committee would do. But you're talking about as an individual. If you would be able to decide upon when a person will or will not.
Yeah, I think you clarified. Yes, I was. Because I thought this is the change for board and committee, the policy as far as the interactions.
The board is
The
still
one part
consists
is for
of
the.
Yeah, but the board still consists of upon the members, and so the members would still have to, I would hope the chair would ask the members what's the wish of the board, and the board would, but, you know,
Like
you can
during-
correct me if, what were you thinking about, Madam Attorney?
Thank you.
Like in the, yeah, so it's because I could be, so I'm making sure because Member Sykes added some clarity. So I just want to make sure I'm not mixing it up. That's why I'm asking, because you're absolutely right, Member Sykes. What I was expressing is from the standpoint of if the chair who's speaking, like for the board member portion, because I know we said as far as the interaction, can we respond to people when they come to board meetings is one piece, and then the committee meetings as far as public participation is the other piece. And so Member Sykes just added another thought process for me, so I need to process it while you talk. Because she kind of said, I think what I was saying, but I just want to be clear. Go ahead.
Right. So this is specific. The language we're talking about is specific to committee meetings. If we want to explore the idea of adding something like this into board meetings and the public participation policy itself, that's something that we can discuss. But this is exclusively regarding committees. And the way this reads, in my opinion, is that it's the committee as a whole and not the chairwoman. So does that clarify everything? Okay.
Thank you. That's when, so when Member Sykes was speaking, I'm like, oh, okay. I get, because it's the whole board. Go.
That actually raised another question in my mind, though, because in our board meetings, we are a board as a whole, but our president, I would say there are differences from who is the president and how that has been handled. And then also for our committee meetings, that if the chair changes, would that change? And then the voting as a committee, I don't believe we've ever called for any type of vote as a committee. So that would be something that when we practice our Robert's Rules of Order, I would have to go through, because usually we kind of have a discussion here and we save all of our voting for the main board meetings. So I don't know if that would affect how this policy is implemented.
I mean, it would not be an official vote of the committee. It would just be what's the opinion of the committee, which the committee wants to allow the person to speak. It's not an official vote. The chair would just kind of survey the group as a whole. But, Madam Attorney?
Thank you. That's kind of what I'm envisioning too, is that it would be something less official, and really there's no problem with responding in some way. I think at its discretion leaves the wiggle room for being, we'll get back to this at another time. If we don't have an answer for you, then we will try to assist you in getting one. I think that language protects the committee to the fullest extent in the event that we don't have an answer for a question.
And my last question is, with this language for the committees as it's, well, possibly my last question, I should not make promises. With this language as it stands, is there any way in its discretion that community participation could be subtly discouraged? I want to prevent that ability, right? I would like to encourage community opportunities. And so do we feel that with this language, regardless of the chair, if there is a community member, that they can be heard appropriately?
Are you, sorry, question for me or not? Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I think that there's probably more language out there in other school policies that can add to encouraging the community participation, but I think that this does the job.
So then, as an unofficial vote of the committee, do we feel that this 0155 is ready to move to a first reading or needs further discussion?
For the public participation, does it have to be something that's on the agenda,
So as part of the 0155 policy, it is not there in policy, but procedurally, I think likely what would happen for this committee specifically is we would do another slight agenda amendment where we would have type discussion and then have the discussion related to the item, and then it would affect our new business, so that way it would allow for new business.
Madam Chair, yes, because to the point, I think the discussions in the last meeting, we talked about it being germane to the topic when they engaged us. So if they wanted to introduce something else that we then would have to come back, follow back up with, right, it would happen in new business, and we could just address it like in the upcoming, it would be an agenda item possibly in the upcoming meeting.
That is for 0155 committees, but also we did have up for discussion the changes in 1691 public participation.
Madam Chair, before we move, so you asked the question if we thought that this was ready to move on as first reading. So I don't have any objection for first reading.
Sorry, thank you. Yes. So we will move 155 for a first reading. And then for 1691, do we feel this is ready to make it to a board meeting? Yeah. And sorry, would you mind doing another quick review of this, Olby? Thanks.
Sure. So there were a couple of changes that we've discussed that, like I said, I think we've come to a consensus on. One of those being, if you look to the third little parentheses bullet, second parentheses bullet, where it says at all regular and special meetings of the board, there we would add the word committees as well, because it's our opinion from a legal standpoint that committees should be included if we're going to open this up to public participation. We've discussed a lot of these other items as well, but sorry, let me just take a look. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just not sure where you're reading from. Where, is this the sheet? This is
Yeah. So the first page, what I just mentioned, is on the first page, this right here, that we would select
at every regular board meeting?
at all regular and special meetings of the board, but as well, we would add the word committee. So at all regular and special and committee meetings, something like that, so that we're including committee specifically within this public policy.
Okay.
We also came to a consensus that we wouldn't limit those who could participate to those that live in the district, so we can get rid of that comment. I don't think that we need to revisit that. And I don't think that there's anything else that really warrants further discussion on my end, but except for D. We did discuss that we would not, I don't know if there was a consensus that was, that we arrived at all, but I know that we talked about why wouldn't someone be able to register someone else to speak if they have to show up.
I'm sorry, yes, this is the hill that I was on. I don't know if I'm going to die on this hill, but because the statement was individuals may not register others to speak during the public participation. And so my view on that is Ms. Folk gets off. We're in the office. She leaves the office before me. I'm coming, like she's coming. She has a concern, and I say, "Hey, Deb, sign me up." I'm not going to be able to speak anyway if I'm not here. I wouldn't be. But if I am here and I do come in and there's a list, I just feel like I don't see what the problem is for someone signing someone up to speak, because it doesn't stop anything. It's not like we have a cutoff as far as a number of people that can sign up. No minutes are taken. We don't wait for a person. If they're not there, we just move down the agenda. So I don't know why would that be an issue.
Madam Chair, actually, that is an issue, because we do have as I understand it, the number of people that can speak may not be limited, but the amount of time that we can use for a person to speak is limited. So if one person comes in and signs up everyone to speak, then someone else could come in and the time would have been taken.
I disagree with that, because the time is not going to be taken because it's not going to be utilized. If someone signs in to speak and Folk speaks at 6:09, she has 3 minutes, right? So then after her 3 minutes is up, if they say Carla Jackson doesn't come up, then they go to Miss Carter. It's not, they don't wait the 3 minutes for Carla Jackson. The agenda keeps moving, so it doesn't hold up. It's not taking any time.
Madam Chair, Member Jackson, the maximum amount of time, as I understand it, is 20 minutes for public speaking. So a person can come in and register a whole group of people, and they can take up the entire 20 minutes, and no one else would have an opportunity to speak on a different subject or the subject that's at hand.
I'm reading this, and it says individuals may not register others to speak during public participation. The way I read this is we have started our public participation. Ms. Jackson is up talking. I can't go sign somebody up while that participation entity is already started. I could sign up before it. The way I'm reading this, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it wrong, says I can't go out while somebody's speaking and sign somebody else up. Am I interpreting that wrong, incorrectly, or am I just reading it differently than everybody else?
You read it differently than everyone else, but I agree with what you're saying, because I didn't catch that. I think you're right.
Well, but that means you still would, to the attorney's comment, want to select that. Because if you don't make the selection, then it would be allowed. I think that's why it was selected.
Well, I
Okay.
think Member Jackson is saying that should be allowed.
Yeah.
No, what
I'm sorry. Thank you, Member Sykes. Thank you, Ms. Folk. No, because I wasn't understanding that to be so. What I meant before the meeting starts, because currently how the meeting is set up, once the meeting starts, the list goes to the chair for those who are participating. No one can be added at that point. So once we start in taking public participation, so no, I agree with that no one should be added at that point. What my disagreement was that if before the meeting and I'm coming, I have or you work closer than me, and I say, Deb, I'm coming to the meeting, just make sure you sign me up, and I'm going to be there. My estimated time is I'll be there by 5:15 or whatever, that you can sign me up, which makes what I said moot at this point, because that's not, as you read it, is what's understood.
Right.
Because I agree with that.
It sounds like we might need, because of these two different interpretations of the same words, which is why implementation is so interesting. It sounds like we almost might want to add, another thing that says something to the point of individuals may not register more than 2 other people, or something like that, but I don't know if that would even be able to be implemented, because we have the online system for registration. And how do we know who is signing up themselves when they sign up online?
I don't have an answer to that question because that all comes through the treasurer. But to your point, how would you hold that accountability in regards to whether it's a registration on paper or online? If myself, I come in and say, Ms. Jackson and Dr. Molinar, I'm going to sign you up, where's that accountability stating that I signed you up versus you signed your own self up? I don't know if that process is there. Regardless of the two topics at hand, I don't know currently a way to enforce that. And all those public comments, signups do come through the treasurer's office, so that would be something Dr. Thompson would need to comment on.
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. Are we still, what is the maximum length of time that the public can speak? Is it 20 minutes?
It is still 20
Okay,
minutes.
thank you. Thank you.
And for clarification, and it can be extended if that's what's chose by the board, if that's allowed, correct?
Yes, I realize that, Madam Chair. That's why we're here today, is trying to make sure that we are not constantly, we're trying to get an amendment that we would not have to constantly suspend the rules or amend the rules in order to allow the public to speak. So it's nice to have that there, but when we're constantly amending or suspending rules, it really makes us look like we don't know what the hell we're doing. So if we could, if we're not talking about the length of time right now, I understand that. I'm just asking for clarification if it's still 20 minutes.
Yes, it is 20 minutes.
Okay, and I'm just clarifying because I don't know that we have a common practice of habitually doing that. I just know it's the privilege of the board if it does happen. The only reason I'm asking too is for clarity on when that's determined, like what is what are the standard operating procedures? Because it's not habitually extended, but do we have something that governs when we decide to be extended versus the privilege of the chair? That's the one thing I'm asking. And then I think the whole thing about the signups, I think we're clear on that, or is it still unreadiness with that? Because my statement is moot at this point for that, based off what Ms. Folk said.
So the time constraints are an H of the current policy. So if you take a look at the document policy 169.1 with on APS letterhead and go to H, that portion of the policy says that the board may provide a period for public participation limited to no less than 20 minutes per meeting unless extended by a simple majority.
Can I throw a whole nother wrench into this also for a point of clarification is by adding committee to this second section, does this mean the signups will be the same process for the committees?
Yeah. So by adding committees to this public participation policy, the public participation policy will cover the committee meetings.
So as we continue to read through 169.1, the first question is, do we feel, as it reads, this is ready for a board meeting, or do we feel that this needs further discussion within committee?
I don't have any concerns about it. I think it's ready.
Madam Chair, I do not feel that it is ready.
And for the notes and possible discussion, are there particular areas within this that you would like us to focus on in the next discussion?
Madam Chair, I think just the mere fact that we're not sure about what this is saying, designated public participation portion, and whether or not an individual can register another individual, and whether or not we can hold an individual to, I'm just not clear on what we're doing. I'm just not clear on it.
Yes.
You're looking at D.
Yes. So perhaps I'm not, Madam Attorney, perhaps I'm not reading this correctly. What are we asking to, individuals may not register others to speak during public participation? That's what we're reading, D as in dog?
Yeah, so when we were discussing that, Ms. Falk pointed out the fact that it says during public participation. So we are, I think, at this point, all comfortable with keeping that selection in D where that's marked.
Okay, so we're not dealing with individuals just generally being able to just register
Right,
other people.
it's not.
We're just doing the
It's right now.
individuals may not register others to speak during public participation. And it's the interpretation of that normally would be, that means when the public starts to speak or before? Since we're not clear on that, do you think the public will be clear on what that actually, that someone actually can register them? I mean, I just don't know if it's.
Oh, I said, should it read, participants who wish to speak to the board may have to register themselves? I mean, if that sounds confusing, individuals may not register others to speak during public participation. So it sounds like maybe I can register them before it starts.
It does?
It does.
It does.
What I was referring to was the fact that no one can add a name once public participation has begun.
So then, as it reads presently, if that is the interpretation of this, then we would then assume that someone can sign up as many other people as they want, as long as it's before the meeting. So are we comfortable with that interpretation, or would we like more clarifying language?
Or should they sign up, should they have to sign themselves up?
Okay. To this, I'm going to ask, as you, sir, has stated, because what is going to be the policing mechanism that then stops because that from happening? Because we spend a lot of time talking about this, and we only when certain issues come before the board do we have like large amount. It's not like a regular thing. But in any event, even if that's the will of everyone, then we have to think, what's the policing agent going to be to make sure that Ms. Sykes is not, I'm just using this, but it's not saying Carla come in, Rebecca come in, Nancy.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah, because there's First Amendment rights or not. The person who signed me up, or the person, whose rights are, it's all about First Amendment. So I think that's where the confusion is, if you start allowing everyone to sign up for,
What about if individuals may not register others to speak, period?
I think that's a fair comment to make only because when you do sign up to speak, especially if you register prior to the actual day of the meeting, you're giving us a reason as to why you want to speak. And having been the benefit of, can you help this person to determine if they want to speak, sometimes that is an important topic. Because sometimes when you work or answer somebody's question, then they decide that they have an answer and they decide not to speak. So I don't know that you truly want to have, to Ms. Sykes and Ms. Jackson's point, a free-for-all for me signing up 30 other people. I may assume I know what they want to talk about. I may be incorrect, so just think of it that process.
I like the statement that just was brought. I'm not against that either, to say just you can't sign nobody else up. Like, if that's going to be the will, if we make that. I mean, I'm just a person, like, just in case I'm running behind, I want my sister to sign me up, but that's okay. I agree. I think that's a fair point Member Sykes makes.
Madam Chair, I just think that it's important to be as clear with the public as possible, because if they feel again that people are not being treated the same and that all people are not being treated equally, and someone came in and signed up, and then how do we define public participation? When is public participation taking place? We as a board may know how we define that, but that does not mean that the public understands how we're defining public participation.
Well, I appreciate all of this discussion, all of these comments, because that's why we don't rush through things.
Yeah.
So as I have it in my notes, where this stands for our conversation so far is that we would check on the first page of 169.1, the stapled version. We would have the second one checked at all regular, special, and committee meetings. And then on the flipped back page, it would be as it is in here, except D would just say individuals may not register others to speak, period. No prepositional phrase there. And then everything else in here would be as in the comments. With those notes, do we feel that we are ready to move for a first reading of the board, or do we want more time to marinate on this?
Madam Chair, so we were looking at page 2 of 2 of the one that has the logo on it, and looking at section G. So when this was revised or done, this is based upon someone signing in advance, and then the board chair or the vice chair, whoever's running the meeting, may deny a request to speak based upon whatever reason, and then they would provide a reason to the board at the board meeting to say why it was denied. But if you have people just coming in and signing in and just speaking, this would not, so the wording on this would need to be revised. That's what I was sharing with Mr. Devenbow, that this would need to be revised to reflect what the board is currently doing, because right now this doesn't. Or will the board change what it's currently doing? So either way, we would need to know so that the wording could be corrected.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So before public participation happens, this part about vendors, specific things, people, employment matters, is that not covered in the, I'm going to use the word, the prelude before people are able to speak? Does that cover that?
Right, it is, but I don't know what you're going to talk about when you get up here, because you just signed in, and I have no idea what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, but if it covers, does that matter if it doesn't violate this, is my point? Because even though this is what's on line, and you would see it in advance to be able to deny it. If they come to the podium and they attempt to violate this, which every time I look at this, I'm thinking there's been numerous violations of this and people don't get cut off because people talk about vendors in specific employment and their mic's not cut, hasn't been cut. But by right, based off the policy, that could in fact happen. Am I understanding that right, attorney? Hello, counsel?
Yeah, no, I heard you. I was, I'm going through this as well. You're asking if the prelude to 169 is included within the Neola document. Is that correct?
Yes, because it's read to Dr. Thompson's point. Isn't that covered because they're not supposed to discuss certain things, even though that's happened? It happens often. Should there, based off of policy, the chair at that point, that could be cut down when they're saying specific vendor names and contracts. They can't, just like they can't say a student's name. Since that's read out, would we have to change anything, or would we just have to change our practice to enforce the policy?
We would have to enforce the policy. But what I'm saying is the wording of this would need to be reflective to an advance notification, or if someone signs in, and then continue with this.
Oh.
But this is written to where if you were in advance. And
Madam-
it doesn't say anything, I'm sorry, Mrs. Syke, it doesn't say anything about a person who just signs up and then comes to the microphone to speak at a board meeting. So it's just a minor adjustment of the wording to address both if I come in and speak and sign in, and if I send in my requests in advance. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm not sure now, what is the issue that we're trying to address?
So
Because I don't think we were trying to address vendors or whether or not the person speaks about vendors, were we? What were we trying to address there?
So that was in this version of it, and the original issue that we were trying to address originally in October is we were trying to marry our Akron policy with the Neola recommendations, which is why we have two documents here.
Okay.
So if Madam Attorney would like to continue, is that, yes, sir.
Thank you. So G on page 2 of the APS letterhead. I know there's a lot of paperwork.
Is it this one? No. This is,
It's 169.1. So G lays out specific matters that are not to be addressed during public participation. I'm not seeing any language in the Neola update with regard to that. I don't know why they took it out, but I think it's prudent to include something like that. And Dr. Robinson's point is that if there are people who are signing up in the day of the meeting, right before the meeting, then how would we address these issues in G? It probably would be prudent to have a statement at least saying that these topics are not to be addressed during public participation, regardless of whether or not they sign up before or after, just as a matter of policy. But how you would enforce that, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, so the only thing I can think of in the Neola is in section J. It talks about the presiding officer's ability to interrupt or warn or terminate someone. You know, if they start talking about something that they maybe is not an appropriate thing, the presiding officer has the ability to cut them off, I guess, is what that one is. But this does make me wonder if this is, if nothing else, an opportunity to bring this policy around for yet another round of discussion where we look more at section G because it is, I think G2 was the actions during, but maybe we need to put more of that into this, because this is the one that we are voting on. This is the one we currently have, so some of this into there. Does that sound reasonable?
Okay, history on this. G1 was an original long-standing policy with the board. I think what happened to everybody's, the last revision that happened in May of 2022 was the section that was added on this. Do you see this, Ms. Sykes? All right, okay. We're all on the same page. I think Section 2 was taken out of a revision from the Neola policy. You can always, Neola is your guideline. You, as a board, always have the right to make it more restrictive. You have to at least equal to the law. I think our two attorneys would, but in this case, I don't know why it's not listed. I can tell you that G1, A, and B have been there for a long time. I don't know why it's not printed in their current version, but it is more restrictive than what they have, and I'm not saying that that isn't important, because those are topics that should not come up in public discussion. And I'll use the example of specific students or student records. That's always the caution that is read that night, because that should be discussed in a private session with the board. But I can tell you that part has been around for a long time, if that helps at all. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, I think that that's what Member Jackson was saying, that the president usually reads that, some similar language. But the bottom line is that if the president is not willing to enforce it, then it has no value.
So it sounds like we're adding to, on the Neola version, adding to Section J, the presiding officer may take the following actions outlined below. 1, actions prior to public participation, deny the request. G1A and B, added to Section J.
G1A and B added to Section J. Where's Section J?
Yeah.
That's where I was at 15 minutes ago.
This Neola one? Let me see if I know. I would give it to you, but I'm afraid
Okay, and then, no, keep yours so you can at least answer. Keep yours.
just here.
Keep yours. Where's Section J?
This is the Neola one, and J is here. And then this is the current UPS one.
Okay. Definitely. Over comments that are respectable, saying, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So with that, do we want to see this printed one more time before we take it to a meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we will do this again and possibly find a way to email this to the committee also so we can review it, please. Thank you. All right, so thank you all for this, I think, important discussion, very important discussion. And now we do have 2 presentations by our special guests. First on CLC usage, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Board members, I wanted to provide you some additional items as a reflective from your last meeting as I read the notes. Please find attached in paper form to your documents the following items. First is a list of the current fees that are charged for rentals, which was requested. This has been a long-standing set of fees. They have been, in general, last board approved in 2001 with only 1 addition, actually 2, and that included technology and safety because those were recent additions. And this is exactly why they are in place. I've also provided to you in attachment policy 7510 and 7550, which are both on APS letterhead. These are your established policies that started and were created in 1998 regarding the use of district facilities. I bring these forth to your attention because it also helps with, as you read them through, with the fact that the board does believe that our facilities are available for community purposes, but it does list, quote, district grounds and facilities shall be available for the below listed uses. When there are competing interests, approval will be given according to the following priorities. A is uses directly related to the schools and operations of schools. B, uses and groups indirectly related to the schools. I want to associate those with your PTAs, your clubs, etc. C, meetings of employee associations. D, uses for voter registration and election. E are governmental agencies. You now are related to the city of Akron and Summit County. F are community organizations or groups of individuals formed for charitable, civic, social, religious, recreational, and educational purposes. And G, commercial and for-profit organizations or individuals offering services for profit. Then it also goes on to list some of the other items that are important, one of which is the use of district grounds and facilities shall not be granted for private social functions or any purpose prohibited by law. And I'll give you an example of that. We cannot allow alcohol to be served on our properties. It's against the revised code, and obviously we not only have an alcohol, drug-free workplace and establishment, but those are other qualifications to that. If you will turn over to the back of this paper, it also says the superintendent shall develop administrative guidelines for the granting of permission to use them with A, each user shall be required to present evidence of the purchase of organizational liability insurance to the limit prescribed by the district administrative guidelines, and B, users shall be liable financially for damage to the facilities and for proper chaperonage, which we have had established for a long time. I also wanted to bring to your attention Board Policy 7550, which also was from 1998 and is in regards to also revised code here in Ohio. And it is joint use of facilities. Ms. Sykes. The Board of Education advocates that joint use expenditure of district funds and municipal or county funds to provide those facilities from which the entire community, children and adults alike may benefit or derive benefits. Superintendent will implement annually a review of administrative procedures for use and rental. And then in accordance with this policy, the board shall, and it's entitled to do so by law, join with local municipal governing body and other school districts or educational institution in acquiring, improving equipment, operating, or maintaining such joint use facilities as playgrounds and playing fields. So this has been a long standard section of our usage as we have established this since those times, and some of this language is reflected in the joint use agreement in its own language that was created in 2003 related to the creation of the CLCs. So these are for your review. I will be back, as Dr. Robinson has indicated, that for an additional presentation on additional information to update you, since the information was provided during my presentation on rentals and use of facilities at the November 27th meeting. All righty, if you have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them now, or we can let the meeting move on. Thank you.
I actually have just a couple questions. So improving, equipping, operating, I'm looking at joint use of facilities, joint use facilities such as playgrounds and playing fields. On the rentals page, I don't see like playgrounds or playing fields on here. And I might be missing it because I'm scanning through, but is it possible for a community member to, use the yard space or a parking lot or those parts of a building? And is that on?
Okay, so let's talk about parking lots in general, and I'm going to use Stan Hewitt Hall. Stan Hewitt often has its October Ohio Mart, and they will contact us by written letter if the facilities around them, such as Firestone, Litchfield, Essex, Case, those are the 4 that are prominently around them, are not in use by the district. We are more than happy to provide those at no cost to Stan Hewitt to shuttle from there, providing they give us the liability insurance while they're there. So each individual usage is a possibility. I currently got a contact today. There are baseball fields over at Betty Jane CLC. And fortunately, one of the baseball and softball leagues that are in that area has seen an increase in membership. And they're looking for some additional fields to use, and we will be meeting with them to start looking at that schedule, Dr. Molnar, along with the fact that they want to sit down with Mr. Boxer and our grounds team to see if they can't help maintain those fields. So sometimes it isn't always listed here because it's what is actually determined case by case. Stadiums are listed on this particular location, along with gyms. Fields are a little bit different because there may not be an amenity that really requires somebody to be on duty, and we work with that individual. I-9 Sports is somebody off the top of my head that I can tell you has used our fields at some of our CLCs. We just want to know they're on property for purposes of safety and security and what liability insurance they can cover for us. So it is an individual adjustment that may be made, and it may be some event that truly takes all of our services, including technology, including safety, where it would be a fully charged unit, whether it is a community use for a 501(c), which is the lower cost on the sheet we provided, or a commercial and private organization, which is the higher fee. I will advise that we recently have, as we've worked through this, contacted a number of school districts and other communities around us, and our fees are well below the normal rental of some of those organizational districts that are not as big necessarily square footage or event-wise as we are, but they certainly have kept their fees growing appropriately to cover the cost. And we have not gone down that road, as I said in my November 27th presentation. But because you wanted to know the policies that already existed, I wanted to make sure you had both of those. Did that help? Ms. Jackson?
Okay, just very quickly. So you mentioned I-9 Sports, and when Madam Chair had made mention about fields and things like that, and he said something about I-9 Sports and no cost usually if they give the insurance.
I-9 Sports is a community organization. They usually just want to have a grass location for their individual participants to use a location near to where their office is. It tends to be Betty Jane, and sometimes it is not necessary. It's a weekend. We don't want access to the inside of Betty Jane itself, so they just go ahead and it's just the field.
Okay, so just for a point of clarification, and this is why that triggered something, because the Pee Wee football, is it because they request usage of the other parts of the facility?
Yes. That normally when the Pee Wee footballs have been with us, and they've been with us for many years, they have usually, in the case, depending on the location, they have wanted to use the restrooms. They have wanted to use the public seating. They've wanted to make sure that they can have vendors there that offset some of their, things like that, and we
Understand.
need to do the kind of trash removal.
Okay, I just wanted
Yes.
clarity because.
Yes, I-9 doesn't bring anything with
They
it.
just simply use the
They
field.
just simply show up on the grass.
Now, what about, I know that it came up at some time as well, inner city soccer coach Dele? Something
Dele
about the
has
soccer.
been using for a number of years 2 locations. His original locations was the Perkins Field on the property where Perkins Middle School was.
Is it free? That's all I want to know. Is it free
He
for him?
was at that time. We no longer own that property. Where he currently has been located is the field located, it's called the St. Mary's Field. It's to your thought of processing, locating it in the city. It is off of Lakeshore Boulevard. It's where the Kenmore Annex was. And there was no charge. We would go out and go ahead and mow it. As the approval came through last summer, we are in the process of changing that ownership and should complete that. And when that ownership goes directly to the city, that field will then become part of the city's issue, not ours.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, I did have one more question, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned the PTAs, and I did see some classrooms on here. So according to the policy, maybe not according to procedure, but according to the policy, for a PTA meeting, does this mean people would be renting out rooms?
They can. They could ask for a classroom. Normally, when the PTA does something, it's usually in conjunction with the regular events of the school. So as an example, they might be having a parent-teacher or a family night, family movie night, and they are there. So they just become part of it. If the PTA wants to actually come and have a meeting of their regional groups and stuff, it would be a regular rental. That is correct. And I have had recently scheduled one, and unfortunately, they didn't get enough participants. They would have been here at 10 North Main on a Saturday.
So if a group of moms wanted to talk PTA stuff after pickup or something like that, technically, are they supposed to be?
No, it's usually affiliated because it is an approved group affiliated with the school. And the principal usually handles that scheduling with us. Does that help? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and sorry to make you wait, but please let us know about our live streaming. And I know Member Sykes in particular wanted to hear about this because as we discussed the opportunity of moving locations around town and the ability for us to do that. So
Would you like me to just wait a minute, or
Well,
you can go ahead and start?
we just wait
Okay.
for her to come.
Sure.
So while we put that on hold, I guess I will do the quick review. I'm going to skip to Section 4, Policy Status Review. So as a reminder, we have Policy 9701, Advertising and Commercial Activities, moving from our last meeting. It's moving to a second and final reading at our next board meeting. And then we have a first reading for the committees that we had today for the, so many pieces of paper. 155? Hey, my memory is not too bad. 155 committees moving to a first reading, and then expected subject 4.03, policies expected for discussion in the next committee meeting. We will continue our 1691 public participation at board meetings. So with that, I think we can begin. Policy 165.4, live stream broadcast at board meetings.
think we can wait for Member Sykes to be seated. She's right at the door.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, you have a copy of the policy 0165.4, which is live stream broadcast of board meetings. It's a couple paragraphs. Just want to make sure you all have a minute to locate that. And no presentation, just general discussion and questions to see specifically what questions I can help answer. But as of right now, 10 North Main is the only building that's currently capable of live streaming board meetings, committee meetings based on the technology that's here. Now, just understand that you can technically live stream with a cell phone or webcam, so there are limitations on what you would want to consider the quality of live streaming. So I just want to make note that this building is currently the only one that has that equipment and set up. So if it's the committee or the board would like to look at other locations, we need to kind of do like a scope of work to see what purchasing additional equipment or maybe looking at some type of mobile station where we're getting cameras and microphones and so forth and kind of moving that around. But at this point, this would be the only building that I would advise for live streaming to occur based on the current technology we have. The kind of questions that you all have, anything that can help answer or anything that we need to research or look into.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, are we answering a question about going out into the community and conducting meetings? Oh, okay. All right.
Madam Chair, so right now, the only way that we can do board meetings in the community is they would have to be recorded and then uploaded to the board docs or wherever that is, because we don't have the capability anywhere in the district but at 10 North Main to live stream any type of meetings.
Madam Chair.
So I do have a question. So I was at STEM High School, my days run together, but I feel like 2 Fridays ago, approximately like that, and I was there for the robotics competition because my son thinks that's really cool. And while we were there, they had on the stage at Central Howard, which we're not going to be in that building much longer, but on the stage there, they had 2 rings set up, and they had the robots, no, 3. They had 3 rings set up, and so they had the robots, so 3 competitions happening at once, and then they had the screen pulled down, and so that way we could see from the audience what was happening each time, and as they were updating the scores, and then they had their computer, the master computer in front of the stage, and there was a slight bit of lag sometimes of the scores being processed from watching the scores live, but I think some of that was actually human, like the entry of that. But they said that that whole thing was being live streamed also because it was part of the VEX Robotics Championship, and so they were live streaming that robotics championship at Central Howard.
Madam Chair, that's correct. So that's where I just want to make the point of depending on the quality and production that you all would like to see. So that is a stationary camera that's over top. So that doesn't include any movement. That doesn't include live commentary to board members, committee members. It doesn't include live commentary to public participation or anything like that. But yes, they do have a setup of a stationary camera, and that feed, to my understanding, is just a direct feed to YouTube for the live stream.
But that's of that school.
Correct.
That's not the system.
Correct.
So they don't have the capability
own...
at Central Howard to live stream our board meetings, because that can only be done through the equipment that we only have here. But a school can live stream its own stuff through their own account, but not what we do here, if that's what you're wanting to receive. What we do here in terms of all of the stuff, we wouldn't be able to do that somewhere else.
So from what I'm hearing is that to live stream somewhere besides here, it is possible with a stationary camera. It would not have the production value that we would have here, where for anyone who maybe is even watching right now, sometimes it pans out, you see the whole room, sometimes you just see whoever is talking at the time. Instead, it would just be the one stationary camera of a table of people, and that is possible.
Correct. So, I mean, just to my original point, you can live stream from a cell phone. So you just need to take in consideration additional factors on microphones, and if you have a stationary camera, more than likely it's just the audio within a few feet of the stationary camera. So you need to have additional setup of the microphones at a podium or the board members, and take that in consideration. Because in the current policy, it states that I think it's paragraph 2, that live streaming meeting includes video and audio of one or more board members and district administrators. So we need to ensure that the microphone and voices of any type of commentary in regards to a public meeting is part of that live stream.
So if we were to, as a board, procedurally discuss something like a stationary camera, that would not require a policy change, as long as everyone had a microphone?
Correct, at that standpoint. So we would just need to look at pricing in regards to what that setup would look like at a location. I don't have that information right now. But in order to follow this policy, this building has the equipment allowed to do that. But if other buildings would need, or you all as a committee or board would be looking at outside, we would need to go through a process of what that would take in regards to having the equipment available at those locations.
As an update to that, please understand that your buildings are a number of various years of being built. Their infrastructures are all different, and their equipment is not equal. So as depending on where your meeting is at, to Zach's point, what piece of equipment is going to satisfy going here as opposed to going there. So because when we built a number of these infrastructures, we had to go through the requirements of the plans for, as an example, the CLCs. North is an older infrastructure, so is Pfeiffer. So not all equipment, one piece of equipment is not necessarily going to be able to be tagged into the infrastructure easily so that it's one system all the way through, because they're all various degrees of age and various degrees of vendor provision, and they are all unique to their particular building. And I would think Mr. Zach would have a very interesting time trying to find a stationary camera, but the microphones and everything else are a little bit different in each location.
I can almost tell you that because you're not going to have these type of microphones, you're not going to have, you're probably not going to have but one mic that you're passing from person to person to person. I'm certainly all for us being in the community and having meetings, which I'd already planned to do, but I was doing that on my own, so I don't need all the equipment, plus it's not live streamed, so I don't have to worry about all the technical stuff, because with that comes, plus our current equipment is outdated that we currently have. that we need to be looking at advancing that. But certainly we would need to know that going into the community to have a meeting, that it's the productivity and the quality is not going to be what you have here at 10 North Main when we go out and have a meeting. So it's no telling what that would look like to a viewer.
And most importantly, in regards to tonight, if that is something that the board or anyone else would be interested in, it would not require any revisions to the current policy. It would be procedural and not policy.
Correct.
Are there any
What I
other
would,
questions?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, what I would say is that this is only a recommendation to the board, that you're not guaranteed that where you have a meeting that you're able to live stream. So I think that in the policy, I know it says to the extent possible. I think that or something needs to be added to say clearly that if the board is unable to live stream wherever that meeting may be, that we may not be able to do a live stream and or record, depending, because sometimes we've been in places, not necessarily here, but I've been in places where trying to even record was very difficult. It depends on wherever you may be, whatever area that you're in and whatever their capabilities are, technical capabilities are. So I would suggest that something be noted that clearly lets people know. So if something happens and you're not able to do it, then someone is not saying, well, your policy says. And that would just be my recommendation.
Thank you. I agree with Dr. Robinson. Where it says will to the extent possible, I can very easily imagine someone finding that to mean that they have it here at 10 North. I think that something else needs to be said, that if this meeting does go on the road and the other committee meetings go on the road, that there may be technical issues and that we won't be violating this policy because of that.
Thank you. Are there any, oh, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to advise an issue that we did resolve last week, but it kind of goes to this. We were hosting a meeting for the city regarding the selection of community input into the police chief at Ellett. We were asked to live stream it. It was not possible for us to live stream. We worked directly with the mayor's office and ended up having to bring in 330 to go to do that live stream for us because it was the only way we could meet the request of the user. I need to also advise you, there's one other thing about our network, and you are well aware that we get E-rate funding from the FCC to support the operation of our network. Community meetings such as that are not K-12 related educational process, which means if we continue to do this, we do not get support from the federal government for those, and we have to off-charge those. So as an example, when we had Head Start here, when we had some other things here that are not K-12, we had to account for all of that when we put in for our reimbursements. So as we look at the new technologies that people are asking us to do, there's two sides to that coin, some of which is the infrastructure that doesn't meet the requirements to the quality that you would want your board meetings to be used and record with to meet this policy. And the other is while your meetings would be K-12 business, others are not. So we wouldn't want to interfere with the reimbursement that we get from the federal support to our network that supports our operational circumstances as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair, who knew?
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments regarding this? Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, just one last comment to Dr. Robinson's point for my previous district. So in case anyone's not aware, I come from the largest public school district in West Virginia in the same role. So we would live stream our board meetings, and then a lot of our committee meetings or LSIC meetings was done out in the public, and those were not recorded or live streamed or anything of that nature. So with that, wherever you guys consider, to the extent possible, if that's something this committee and the board would like to take in consideration as well on those mobile committee meetings out in the public, whether you would like them to be recorded, live streamed, just having that clarification piece in there.
Thank you, everybody. And I would like to be respectful of everyone's time. I do recognize it is 7:08, but we have at least one item of new business. So if we may, please, with our first use of this in our new agenda, new business, discussion of policy 147, compensation, please.
Thank you. So there's a discrepancy in 0147 and the Ohio Revised Code. So in ORC 3313.12, which you have, the code states that no member of a school district board of education shall receive a compensation under this division greater than $5,000 per year. Currently, APS's policy is members can be compensated for up to 50 meetings per year at $125. That equates to $6,250. So I think what we are proposing is that we bring this to a reading in front of the committee and move it up from new business to a discussion topic so that we can revise this discrepancy to make sure that the policy is in line with the revised code.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
Madam Chair, I would agree. I'm just finding out I get paid $125. When did that happen? I would agree.
Is it possible or reasonable to kind of future-proof this in a way to phrase it something to say, board members may be paid to the maximum allowable by Ohio Revised Code or something like that. So that way, if Ohio Revised Code changes, decreases, something like that, we're still in compliance?
Yeah, I think that would be acceptable.
All right, so we will move this one up to discussion. Is there any other new business? All right, thank you all. And with that, that's 2 minutes. It's 7:10. We will adjourn. Thank you.